The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete lot of Desert Storage Solutions as Danny Rodriguez wiped sweat from his forehead. It was 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in September 2023, and the weekly storage auction was about to begin. Danny had been doing this dance for 3 years now, Faye arriving early, studying the auction list, calculating risks and potential profits from abandoned storage units whose owners had stopped paying rent. At 34, Danny was a former auto mechanic who had discovered the storage unit flipping business during the pandemic when his garage closed down. He had started with a $500 investment and had slowly built it into a modest side business that paid his bills. Most weeks he'd buy 1 or 2 units, sort through the contents, and sell anything valuable on eBay or Facebook Marketplace. It was honest work, if unpredictable. The lock cutter's blade sparked against the metal as Danny prepared to open storage unit 247B. For $300, Faye, his highest bid of the morning, he had just bought what the auctioneer had described as old electronics in boxes, looks like computer stuff. Danny had competed against only one other bidder, a regular named Steve who usually went for furniture and household goods. Steve had dropped out at $275. Shaking his head and muttering something about worthless old junk. Danny's 3 years of experience had taught him that electronics could be hit or miss. Sometimes you'd find valuable vintage audio equipment or working computers that could be refurbished and sold. More often you'd discover obsolete technology that belonged in a recycling center. But something about this particular unit had caught his attention during the brief preview period, when bidders were allowed to peer inside with flashlights. The previous owner was Harold Chen, a 67-year-old software engineer who had passed away 6 months earlier from a sudden heart attack. His family, scattered across the country, had stopped paying the $127 monthly storage fee after 3 months of bureaucratic delays in settling his estate. Harold's sister in Boston had authorized the facility to auction off the contents, assuming it contained nothing more valuable than old computer equipment and paperwork from their brother's lengthy career in technology. They couldn't have been more wrong, as the heavy metal door rolled up with a prolonged metallic screech that echoed across the storage facility. Danny's flashlight beam cut through the musty darkness, illuminating something that made his heart skip several beats. Wall-to-wall metal shelving lined the 10x20 unit from floor to ceiling, and every single shelf was meticulously organized with what appeared to be hundreds upon hundreds of pristine video game boxes. Not just any video games, Faye. These were still sealed in their original plastic wrapping, their cellophane surfaces reflecting his flashlight beam like tiny mirrors. "Holy," Danny whispered, his voice barely audible as he stepped into what felt like a gaming museum that had been frozen in time since the 1980s. The air inside the unit carried the distinctive smell of old cardboard and plastic. But underneath that was something else. The faint chemical scent of preservation materials. Harold Chen hadn't just been a casual collector throwing games into boxes. This was the work of someone who understood conservation. Someone who had treated these items like artifacts worthy of museum quality care. Harold Chen's story, Danny would later discover, began in 1982 when he was hired as a software engineer by Datatronics Distribution, a small company in Torrance, California that had secured one of the early contracts to distribute Nintendo products in the American market. Harold had been fascinated not just by the technology behind video games, but by their cultural potential. In his first notebook entry from that year, he had written, "These aren't just toys. They're going to change how people think about entertainment, maybe even how they think about stories and art." While his colleagues saw video games as a temporary fad, a few years of novelty before people returned to more traditional forms of entertainment, Harold recognized something deeper. He began purchasing multiple copies of every game that crossed his desk, paying retail price for items his company sold wholesale. His coworkers thought he was wasting money. His supervisor, Margaret Kim, later recalled in an interview, Harold would buy 2 or 3 copies of every new Nintendo release. He'd keep them in perfect condition, never even opening one. We all thought he was a little obsessive, but he was such a good worker that nobody complained about his hobby. Harold's systematic approach to collecting revealed itself in the meticulous organization Danny discovered in the storage unit. Games were arranged not just alphabetically, but by release date, production run size, and rarity. Each game was stored in a custom-made protective case that Harold had designed himself, with climate control packets to prevent moisture damage and foam inserts to prevent movement during transport. The first box Danny picked up with trembling hands was a factory-sealed copy of Stadium Events for the Nintendo Entertainment System, a game so extraordinarily rare that only 200 copies were ever produced, before Nintendo recalled the entire run due to licensing complications with Bandai. The last known copy to sell at auction had fetched $41,300 in 2019. Danny was holding what appeared to be a mint-condition copy with its original price sticker still attached, $39.99 from software, etc., in the Glendale Galleria, dated March 1987. But Stadium Events was just the beginning of Harold's incredible collection. As Danny explored deeper into the temperature-controlled unit, he discovered cardboard boxes labeled in Harold's meticulous engineering handwriting, Nintendo Power Championship Cartridge FE1 of 116, ever-made FE competition grade. Inside was the distinctive gray cartridge that had been used in the 1990 Nintendo World Championships, a gaming competition held in 30 cities across the United States. Only 116 of these cartridges had ever been created specifically for the competition, with each one containing a custom compilation of Super Mario Bros., Rad Racer, and Tetris, programmed to run for exactly 6 minutes and 21 seconds. The Nintendo World Championship cartridge was worth approximately $100,000, but Harold's copy came with something that made it even more valuable: the complete documentation package. Harold had somehow acquired not just the cartridge, but the original competition rules, score sheets from the Los Angeles qualifying round, and a letter from Nintendo of America explaining the technical specifications of the tournament software. For serious Nintendo collectors, this wasn't just a rare game FE. It was a complete historical artifact from one of gaming's most legendary events. Harold's attention to detail extended beyond just the games themselves. Danny found climate monitoring equipment that Harold had installed in the storage unit, with charts showing temperature and humidity readings dating back 15 years. The engineer had maintained perfect storage conditions, 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, with 45 to 55% humidity year-round. Every game had been stored in archival quality materials, with silica gel packets replaced every 6 months, according to Harold's detailed maintenance logs. In one corner of the unit, Danny discovered what would become the crown jewel of the entire collection: a simple brown cardboard box labeled in Harold's careful handwriting, Meme Prototype FE, 1985 FE, Do Not Distribute FE Nintendo Confidential. Inside, wrapped in anti-static foam, was something that theoretically shouldn't exist: a prototype version of Super Mario Bros. That contained levels never seen in the final commercial release. The cartridge was labeled Super Mario Bros. Alpha Build V0.7 and dated the 15th of August, 1985, 3 months before the game's official Japanese release. When Danny later had it examined by gaming historians, they confirmed it was genuine development hardware containing 4 complete levels that Nintendo had removed from the final version, including a water-based world featuring swimming mechanics that wouldn't appear in a Mario game until Super Mario Bros. 3, and an underground castle level that existed only in early development sketches found in Nintendo's archives decades later. Harold's collection revealed the story of a man who had understood the future cultural significance of video games long before anyone else took them seriously. While parents threw away their children's old Nintendo games and garage sales featured boxes of cartridges selling for 50 cents each, Harold had been quietly building what amounted to a comprehensive archive of gaming history. His notebooks, which Danny found carefully stored in acid-free document boxes, revealed a systematic approach to collecting that bordered on academic research. Harold had tracked production numbers, documented regional release differences, and maintained correspondence with other early collectors around the world. One particularly fascinating notebook from 1987 contained Harold's analysis of which games would become valuable. Super Mario Bros. 2 Japanese version will be extremely rare in America. Zelda Gold cartridge production numbers suggest future collectability. Castlevania showing strong secondary market demand already. The documentation Danny found painted a portrait of Harold's daily life in retirement. After leaving his engineering job in 2018, Harold had spent most of his time cataloging and organizing his collection. There were photographs of Harold carefully arranging games by release date, condition, and rarity factors. He had created a small display area in the back corner of the storage unit, complete with a 1985 Zenith television and an original NES console, where he would sometimes spend hours playing through his collection and making detailed notes about gameplay mechanics and design decisions. Harold had never married and had no children. His closest family members lived on the East Coast and had never shared his passion for video games or technology. His nephew Marcus later admitted, "Uncle Harold would try to show us his Nintendo collection during family visits, but we just didn't get it. We thought he was spending too much money on kids' toys. We had no idea he was preserving history." When Harold died suddenly of a heart attack in March 2023, his family saw only clutter where Harold had seen cultural treasure. The storage unit became just another monthly expense. They couldn't afford to continue paying while sorting through Harold's estate. After 3 months of attempting to find someone interested in old video games, they authorized the storage facility to auction off the contents. Danny's discovery included over 800 complete in-box Nintendo games spanning the original NES through the GameCube era. But the real treasures were the 47 prototype cartridges that Harold had somehow acquired through his industry connections. Among the prototypes were early development versions of The Legend of Zelda, featuring different dungeon layouts, Metroid with alternate weapon systems, and Mega Man containing enemy designs that never appeared in the final game. Each prototype came with Harold's detailed analysis notes. For the Zelda prototype Harold had written, contains original ending sequence with different dialogue. Link's character sprite is 2 pixels taller. Triforce appears to be yellow instead of gold in inventory screen. This may represent an earlier artistic direction. For gaming historians, Harold's notes were almost as valuable as the prototypes themselves. The authentication process became a months-long odyssey that attracted attention from across the gaming world. Danny had to coordinate with specialists from around the country to verify the prototypes. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a video game historian from USC who had written extensively about early Nintendo development, flew to Phoenix to examine the collection personally. In 30 years of studying video game history, Dr. Martinez explained during her authentication process, "I have never seen a collection of this scope and condition. Mr. Chen appears to have maintained museum quality standards for over 40 years. These prototypes fill in gaps in gaming history that we thought were lost forever." The prototype authentication required specialized equipment to read the cartridge data without damaging the original hardware. Dr. Martinez worked with a team of engineers to create custom adapters that could extract the game code for analysis while preserving the historical integrity of the cartridges. The Super Mario Bros. Prototype alone required 3 weeks of careful examination to verify its authenticity and document all the differences from the retail version. The gaming community's reaction was explosive when Danny finally decided to go public with the discovery in January 2024. The first YouTube video showcasing the collection accumulated 2.3 million views in its first week. Gaming forums crashed under the traffic load as collectors and historians tried to process high-resolution photographs of games they had only heard about in legends and rumors. Frank Cifaldi, director of the Video Game History Foundation, called it the most significant private collection discovery in gaming history. Representatives from Nintendo of America reached out through intermediaries, expressing interest in studying the prototypes for potential future retro gaming releases and historical documentation projects. The story captured mainstream media attention when major news outlets picked up on the human interest angle, a lonely engineer whose worthless hobby turned out to be a multi-million-dollar archive of cultural history. CNN ran a segment titled "The Gamer Who Collected the Future," while the Wall Street Journal featured Harold's story in their weekend arts section. But the monetary value, ultimately appraised at $2.1 million by Heritage Auctions, was only part of what made Harold's collection remarkable. Gaming industry veterans began reaching out to share their memories of Harold from his distribution company days. Margaret Kim, Harold's former supervisor, contacted Danny with boxes of old company memos and photographs, showing Harold at industry trade shows in the 1980s. Harold was always taking pictures of everything, Margaret remembered. He'd photograph new game displays, document promotional materials, save every piece of marketing literature. We thought he was just being thorough, but looking back, he was creating a historical record of an industry that was changing every month. The emotional impact of the story deepened when Danny successfully located Harold's nephew Marcus, who lived in Boston and worked as an insurance adjuster. Marcus had barely maintained contact with his uncle over the years, and admitted he had always found Harold's video game obsession embarrassing during family gatherings. When Danny called Marcus and explained what had been found in Harold's storage unit, there was a long silence on the phone. "You are telling me," Marcus finally said, his voice breaking, "that Uncle Harold's Nintendo games are worth $2 million? When Danny confirmed the appraisal, Marcus broke down completely. "Uncle Harold tried to show me his collection when I was maybe 12 years old." Marcus remembered through tears. He was so excited, explaining about rare games and why they were special. "I told him video games were stupid and that he was weird for caring about them so much. I saw how much that hurt him, but I was just a kid who wanted to seem cool. He never mentioned his collection to me again." The story took another emotional turn when Danny discovered Harold's final project, documented in his last notebook entries from early 2023. Harold had been working on creating a comprehensive digital archive of his collection, with detailed photographs and historical context for each game. His goal was to donate the archive to universities and museums, ensuring that future researchers would have access to gaming history, even if his physical collection was eventually sold. Harold had completed about 60% of this digital preservation project before his death. His computer, also found in the storage unit, contained thousands of high-resolution photographs and detailed research notes about gaming industry development in the 1980s and 1990s. Harold had been conducting email interviews with former Nintendo employees, Atari developers, and other industry veterans, collecting oral histories that would have been lost forever. Danny made a decision that surprised everyone in the gaming community. Instead of selling the entire collection to the highest bidder, Faye, which would have made him an instant millionaire, he chose to work with Marcus to honor Harold's original vision. They established the Harold Chen Gaming Preservation Foundation, funded by selling approximately half of the collection, while keeping the most historically significant pieces for permanent museum display. The Foundation's first major accomplishment was completing Harold's digital archive project. Using Harold's detailed notes and photography setup, volunteers worked to document every remaining item in the collection with museum quality standards. The resulting archive became freely available online, allowing researchers, students, and gaming enthusiasts worldwide to study high-resolution images of rare games and development materials. The prototype Super Mario Bros. Cartridge found its permanent home at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, where it anchors an exhibition called "Playing with Power: The Evolution of Video Games." Visitors can experience the lost levels through a carefully programmed emulation that shows how video game development worked in the 1980s, when every byte of memory was precious and every design decision shaped the future of interactive entertainment. Nintendo of America eventually issued a formal statement acknowledging the historical significance of Harold's prototypes. "We are grateful for Mr. Chen's dedication to preserving gaming history. His collection has provided us with insights into our own development processes that we had lost track of over the decades. Some of the prototype content in his collection has influenced design decisions in our current retro gaming initiatives. The Harold Chen Gaming Preservation Foundation now operates a small museum in Harold's honor, located in a converted warehouse space in Phoenix. The museum displays rotating selections from Harold's collection, while serving as a research center for gaming historians. Marcus, who had taken a leave of absence from his insurance job to help establish the foundation, discovered that he had inherited more than just his uncle's passion for preservation. He had inherited Harold's meticulous attention to detail and genuine love for the cultural impact of video games. "I spent 30 years thinking my uncle was wasting his life on kids' toys," Marcus reflected during the museum's opening ceremony. "Now I understand that he was documenting the birth of a new art form. He saw the cultural significance of video games before anyone else did, and he made sure that history wouldn't be lost." But there is still one mystery that continues to drive treasure hunters throughout Phoenix and beyond. In Harold's final notebook entry, dated just 2 weeks before his death, he wrote, "The real treasure isn't in Unit 247B. That is just the public collection. Check the climate controlled facility on Roosevelt Street. Key is taped under the workbench. Everything I kept secret is waiting there." Danny and Marcus have spent months trying to solve this puzzle. The key Danny found taped under Harold's workbench is unusual. Fade is a high-security electronic keycard rather than a traditional metal key, suggesting a premium storage facility with advanced security systems. However, none of the climate-controlled facilities on Roosevelt Street have any records under Harold's name, and the keycard doesn't match any known local storage company systems. Harold's bank records, scrutinized by Marcus during estate settlement, show monthly payments of $347 to Desert Climate Solutions, LLC, for 7 years. But this company appears to have been dissolved in 2022, with no forwarding information. The payment stopped automatically when Harold's bank account was frozen after his death, but there is no indication of what happened to whatever Harold was storing. The gaming community has turned Harold's final mystery into a modern treasure hunt. Amateur investigators have combed through Harold's notebooks, looking for additional clues, analyzed his financial records for hidden payments, and even used ground-penetrating radar to search abandoned warehouses on Roosevelt Street. YouTube channels dedicated to the Harold Chen mystery have accumulated millions of views as creators document their search efforts. Some investigators believe Harold's secret collection might contain even rarer items than what was found in the Phoenix storage unit, perhaps development hardware, prototype consoles, or games from companies other than Nintendo. Others theorize that Harold had discovered a cache of early video game source code or development documents that companies had assumed were lost forever. Dr. Martinez from USC has suggested that Harold's secret might not be another game collection at all, but rather his research archive, correspondence with game developers, recorded interviews with industry pioneers, or documentation about the early video game industry that Harold had promised to keep confidential during his lifetime. Harold was connected to people throughout the gaming industry, Dr. Martinez explained. He may have been trusted with materials that developers weren't ready to make public. If there is a second collection, it might contain the kind of historical documentation that could reshape our understanding of how video games evolved. The mystery has inspired a new generation of gaming historians to take preservation more seriously. Museums and universities are now actively seeking out collections from early industry workers, hoping to document gaming history before more of it is lost to time and neglect. Meanwhile, Danny has returned to his storage unit auction routine, but with a completely different perspective. Every unit he bids on now carries the possibility that another Harold Chen might have left behind a lifetime of careful collecting. He has developed relationships with estate sale companies and family attorneys, hoping to prevent other historically significant collections from being accidentally discarded. Harold changed how I think about everything, Danny reflected. Before I found his collection, I was just looking for stuff I could flip for quick money. Now I realize that somebody's junk might be the key to understanding our culture. Harold spent 40 years preserving gaming history when nobody else thought it was worth saving. I want to make sure we don't lose any more treasures because families don't understand what they have. The storage unit that had sat locked and forgotten for months became the key to unlocking a forgotten chapter of gaming history. Harold Chen, the quiet engineer who had collected games while others collected stamps or coins, had inadvertently preserved a crucial record of how modern entertainment culture was born. Harold's notebooks reveal a man who understood that he was witnessing something historically significant, even when the rest of the world saw video games as a passing fad. His final public notebook entry, written in December 2022, reads like a letter to the future. I hope whoever finds this collection understands what they're looking at. These aren't just games. They're the foundation of a new kind of storytelling, a new way for humans to interact with fictional worlds. Someday, people will study these the way we study early films or rare books. I just want to make sure they survive long enough for that to happen. He succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. But somewhere in Phoenix, that second storage unit continues to wait, containing whatever Harold Chen decided was too precious or too secret to include even in his life's work. The gaming community continues to search, following every clue Harold left behind because they learned one crucial lesson from the Phoenix discovery. When a true preservationist like Harold Chen says there is treasure hidden somewhere, you never stop looking. After all, in the world of retro gaming, the most valuable discoveries are always the ones nobody saw coming.